before the ceasefire, Biden was worried that the pause would allow more journalists access to the carnage, which would then turn public opinion against Israel. This is actually from Politico saying, and there was some concern in the administration about an unintended consequence of the pause, that it would allow journalists broader access to Gaza and the opportunity to further illuminate the devastation there and turn public opinion on Israel. Oh, the horrors. People finding out the truth. Oh, the horror of this. Oh, can you believe that our administration had concern that people might see the truth? That, if people saw the truth, that might actually cause the public to turn on Israel. So then shouldn't we all be given that truth? Shouldn't we be given access to that truth? Why do they have to continue lying to us in order to give a nation our support? If the truth cannot support Israel, then Israel needs to change. That's what needs to happen so that Israel can gain the support from the public. Israel can certainly gain that support. Israel can be a country that is safely nestled in the Middle East with millions upon millions, billions of people, in fact, supporting their existence, championing their existence, but they have to change. They can't continue to behave like this and ethnically cleanse an entire group of people out of their country, wanting those people to not be in that country, but instead to go somewhere else, to say, why don't you just leave this country, leave your home, leave the home that your family's known for hundreds of years and go somewhere else. The carnage is atrocious. It turns out people did go during this pause and they did see the carnage. There have been even some foreign delegations that have shown up. The Red Cross, the Red Crescent, all of them were able to come in and give aid to the Gazans and to assess the damage. And it is really bad. Some say this is according to Al-Quds saying you can see tens of decomposed martyrs' bodies on the streets. Martyr is the word they use for anyone who's been killed, anyone who's even if you die from cancer or anything, you're called a martyr. It's just the word that they use. So if you died innocently, then they'll say you could see tens of decomposed martyrs' bodies on the streets. Tens of houses have been destroyed in the massive destruction in Beit Laina. Dogs are eating corpses on the streets of Gaza. Really terrible. Qatari official describes unparalleled destruction. Nonetheless, the White House is removing all restrictions and is going to give Israel whatever it is they want when it comes to ammunition, firepower, weapons. They're actually green-lighting giving Israel anything and everything that they ask for. So even though we've seen this carnage, even though we see a ratio, a civilian to combatant ratio that is unseen in any other war, the White House has said, yeah, we're going to go ahead and remove all restrictions on categories of weapons and ammunition that Israel is allowed to access from the U.S. weapons stockpiles. So the request says the request would modify requirements that apply to certain defense articles that the Department of Defense transfers to Israel. So right now, it currently allows the DoD to transfer only specific categories of weapons to Israel in exchange for certain concessions from Israel, subject to multiple restrictions, including that the weapons are obsolete or surplus to the Department of Defense. So if we can't use them, then we can transfer some weapons to Israel, but we have to get some certain concessions out of them. However, and also the president has to notify Congress at least 30 days before the transfer that they're going to be making this special transfer of weapons to Israel. The new modification to the section that the Biden administration is requesting is to allow for the transfer of all categories, doesn't matter, all categories of weapons, remove the requirements that these weapons be obsolete or surplus so they get our fresh new stuff, and allow the DoD greater flexibility in determining the value of the concessions provided in exchange for the transfers. So they basically say, we don't need you to give us any concessions. It's fine. Don't worry about it. Yeah, go for it. And also they're asking for the possibility of shortening the 30-day notice that the president is supposed to be giving. So basically they're just going to give Israel all the weapons they could want out there. They just give them everything. Interestingly, behind closed doors, Biden is pressuring Israel. So this is what people are saying. Even though in front of the world, he's given them all the weapons they want. We're supposed to be giving them all these billions of dollars. Biden says that he supports Israel, although he does call for a two-state solution, which is clearly different than what Netanyahu really wants to do. Behind closed doors, according to the Washington Post, Biden is pressuring Israel. But the question is then who is really in control? Because if Biden is sitting there pressuring Israel behind closed doors, yet here's Trita Parsi's tweet. He puts it up, put it out there really, really well, saying Biden trying is not enough for a simple reason. The U.S. is the superpower, not Israel. The U.S. gives Israel aid and weapons, not the other way around. Biden has the leverage to stop this, and he hasn't, full stop. So who is really in charge? That's a really good question. What has happened that would create this balance of power shifting to where Israel's really the ones in control? They're the ones with all the power. This is something that Netanyahu has said for decades, that he could work on the Americans. The Americans, he's got Americans wrapped around his finger. He can get us to do whatever he wants. And that is, yes, maybe there was a point when Israel was more at our behest because we were the ones giving them money, we were the ones giving them weapons. Maybe that was something that the power balance was the U.S. was the big brother and Israel was the little brother. But something along the line has shifted and changed, because now that is clearly not the case, and Israel is calling the shots. Why is that? Probably, money talks. We know money, whoever has the most money for the power is where the power is. So yes, the U.S. gives Israel a lot of money, but there's a lot of pro-Zionist Israeli donors that give a lot of money to our members of Congress, that give a lot of money to these campaigns, that give a lot of money to various different organizations. And so their money likely outweighs the money the United States gives to Israel. And that's always the math that needs to be done to find out who's really in charge. And what's interesting is we're seeing some, this is just kind of a side note, we're seeing the mainstream media, a bit of them starting to inch further away from the really staunch pro-Israel narrative that they've taken for decades. And now they're starting to call into question. They're starting to have different viewpoints on their programs. I'm seeing this on CNN, seeing this on MSNBC, right? We're seeing some of these in the New York Times, Washington Post. We're starting to see some of these narratives. Certainly, actually, I have to take back the Washington Post because I haven't seen that quite yet, but I've certainly seen it on the New York Times. I've seen it in CNN, seen it in MSNBC, the attitudes shifting. And the question is really, who has more money? So the New York Times, we're starting to see a shift in their reporting. Well, is that because, they definitely get a lot of money from a lot of pro-Israel, pro-Zionist donors and people who are really in support of that? But do they get more money from the people who subscribe to their newspaper? Does that money now outweigh the amount of money they get from the pro-Zionist donors? Because if so, we're going to see the narrative shift. Because the New York Times is going to want to go with where the money is. They don't want to lose money. That's always what's going on when it comes to these narratives. Oftentimes it's losing money. And maybe, just maybe, the subscribers have bigger money collectively than the pro-Zionist sources in the past who've given a lot of money to the New York Times, or some, supported them in various different ways, or run their newspaper or whatever. And so that's always what the question is. Who has the bigger wallet? Who's got the bigger purse? And who's giving it to who? And that is ultimately when we see narrative shifts. And sometimes that's a really bad thing. Sometimes that's a really bad thing. Sometimes it's a good thing. It just kind of depends. You have to use your own assessment in looking at these various different conflicts, different situations, and then, use your independent thinking and figure out what is the right side of history on things, even if it's very unpopular, or sometimes it'll be popular. And that's what we hope. We hope that sometimes the masses are right about certain things. At this point, though, the masses are still pro-Israel. So that is where we're at with it. And that is what's going on with that. But very interesting. And we will keep you updated. Again, the ceasefire is continuing for another couple of days, and hopefully that will save some more lives and help the people who desperately need the help, and also the release of the hostages. Absolutely want to see these hostages coming home. It's got to be terrifying to be held hostage. There's a lot of variety of reports coming out. Can't trust anything hostages say while they're being held in captivity. Really interested to hear these hostages give interviews when they are out away from the governments, and also when the public pressure isn't on them either. So there's going to be a lot of public pressure from people around them to say, to stay in line with the narrative, to not stray from that or say things like, actually, I wasn't beaten in captivity. Actually, they weren't that awful to me in captivity. I didn't want to be in captivity, but it wasn't that bad. That's some of the stories we're hearing are like that. Just keep it all, take it all with a grain of salt right now, because you never know why they're saying it. And also, we got to wait and see what these people say, and probably wait and see what they say even a couple of years from now when the temperature is cooled a bit.